Welcome to Beyond Her Campus, celebrating 15 years. I'm Julianne Scriven, the Community Director at Her Campus, and we're excited to bring you this inspiring episode of our limited series podcast celebrating 15 years of Her Campus. In this series, we catch up with some of our most successful alumni, from news anchors and content creators to authors and mental health advocates. These women have incredible stories to share. Get ready for an insightful conversation filled with inspiration and advice. Let's jump in. Anna, thank you so much for joining us today on Beyond Her Campus, celebrating 15 years. I am so excited for our conversation today. You are such a testament to how the experiences learned through Her Campus can be adaptable and relevant, especially in all different types of fields with your work in mental health now. I am just excited to dive in here because this is a topic, as I was mentioning to you a little bit earlier before we started recording, that gets brought up by college students, post-grad, folks all the way well into their career about finding a balance for mental health, but also how to actually make their mental health a top priority rather than just trying to incorporate it into an hour here or 30 minutes here or there.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Julianne, thank you so much for having me. It is really an honor to be here, and a huge congratulations to Her Campus on 15 amazing years of true impact. I'm excited to chat with you today. Mental health is really important, and there are so many different ways that we can think about it and figure out how to prioritize it for ourselves.
You have, in so many ways, a dream job as a social impact specialist. Clarify a little bit, what does that mean? What does your day-to-day look like?
Yeah, I mean, it absolutely is a dream job. I feel so fortunate and privileged and lucky to be able to take these skills into maybe some non-traditional spaces. But essentially, what I'm really focused on in my work is taking the information that I'm getting from communities all over the country, or whether it's a city or a local community that I'm working with, really listening to how our product can support their needs and equipping them with the tools that they need to kind of take those resources and embed them into their communities on a day-to-day basis. So I work really closely with nonprofit organizations everywhere who are already doing this work and doing really important work in a lot of different industries and a lot of different spaces. And the idea is not to come in and say, we have something that's going to make everything better or that's going to replace what you do, but really to just add to the work that's already being done in such an impactful way. So, at Headspace, that looks like helping communities develop resources that are really specific to their needs and the things that they're looking to address in their community, and just kind of getting on the ground with them, rolling up my sleeves alongside them and figuring out together how we can embed these mental health resources into their programming, whether that's supporting their staff or students in a school setting, whatever it might be. But taking these resources, figuring out how to implement them into their programs to ultimately just be a positive asset to the work that's being done.
I want to catch us up to the exact current moment that we're living in, where it feels almost impossible to protect mental health with the amount that we are seeing on social media, just day to day, from the political climate. What is your initial advice for anybody who needs to protect their headspace or wants to protect their headspace, but still needs to go on social media, still needs to keep up with the news, still needs to go through life in 2024?
Yeah, well, I'm so glad you're bringing this up, Julianne, because it's such an important topic, and it is really something that impacts all of us, whether or not we realize it. We all have mental health, just like we all have physical health. We all have bodies and minds, and we move through the world experiencing things in different ways. So I have a few thoughts on this. Firstly, for me, it's really important to remember to slow down when possible. And I know that's hard to do sometimes. There's so much to do, so much to think about, and so much to consume all the time. And when we don't take a moment here or there to just check in with ourselves, take a deep breath, have a glass of water, whatever it might be, we aren't creating the space that we need to think critically and to show up authentically. It's really important that we take those moments, and those don't have to be long moments. I know we're busy, we have things to do, but it sends a message to our body when we take a minute to show ourselves, I'm going to take care of myself for a minute here. And that's a muscle that we really want to keep building. And that's in school and after in post grad life too. But some of those small things can definitely also be classified as self care. And I think we need to remember that that doesn't have to be a big grand gesture that's expensive or that takes a lot of time. It's just a commitment to yourself to do the best you can to show up for yourself in small ways. And like a lot of things, a lot of small moments can add up to a really big impact. And lastly, I'd say for me, I've really been leaning into this idea that community care is part of self-care. So how we take care of ourselves translates into how we care for others. And the opposite of that is true too. It's important to remember we're not going through any of this life stuff, work stuff, any of it alone, even though it might feel that way sometimes. We really are built to exist in community. So let's work on removing some of the pressure that we put on ourselves at the individual level. When I've done the basic things that I need to do to feel most like myself, it's easier for me to evaluate, okay, where do I need a little extra support this week? Who might have a little extra room in their backpack to help me carry this? Or, you know what, I actually feel really good this week. Where can I pick up some more for someone who might need it in my workplace, in my family, whatever that might be. But, those are just some of the ways that I think we can stay grounded as individuals through the chaos and all of the noise, just really create a strong energy of togetherness in the process.
I have never heard the phrase community care before, and it is something I'm still processing as we're chatting, because you're right in so many regards of that. When you're prioritizing your own mental health, it does right off the bat provide an example for your roommate, for your best friend, for your partner, for your coworkers that, hey, this is something that I am protecting and here's how I am doing it. And even if it's imperfect, and even if, your method of slowing down is not the same for somebody else, I think being that example sets up your community and sets up those in your orbit to do the same, and to even see like, oh, if Julianne is doing that, if Anna is doing that, that also means I can do that. And it almost has a snowball effect. I also love the idea that you should build that community around you, and it's not necessarily a siloed action. I think mental health becomes an individualistic conversation, and I've never heard it become something community-based. But how amazing is that when we can all come together and support each other in the same way that, you go to the gym with each other. I'm in a spin group chat. Like, physical health has become prioritized as a togetherness, but not so much the mental health.
So true. It's so true. And it removes some of the pressure of having to show up so perfectly in that journey of caring for yourself too. Being able to show others that there isn't one right way to do it is such an important way to model how we can really be our best selves.
Your first piece of advice was to slow down. What are some examples that you can share of slowing down, especially when you are balancing a full-time job, when you are prioritizing social life, and you live in New York City, go, go, go? How can you slow down in that space?
It's such a good question. And again, it's really something that I think looks different for everyone. So I would even preface this by saying, don't be discouraged if it takes you some time to figure out what slowing down means for you and what it looks like for you. And it's not to say that you have to change your whole lifestyle, that you can't necessarily live this busy and full and abundant life, but it's just recognizing what those signals are physically for you, that maybe there's a message being sent to your brain that you just need to take a minute. So for some people, your heart might start racing, or if you really don't get a good night's sleep, you might not feel like you have the energy to show up and do your most creative work. So whatever that signal is, notice it, really notice it. Take a minute to recognize it. And you don't have to change the course of your entire day, but maybe it's getting up from your seat at the library and taking a quick lap around campus. Maybe it's going to get a glass of water or, a drink that will kind of ground you, because that physical sensation of just focusing on taking a sip of water or having a snack is something that we can physically focus on and kind of distract our brain a little bit from all of the chaos that's going on. But, you just mentioned a spin class. I think there's so many different ways that we can put ourselves first and prioritize what we need in order to feel like our best selves. And I'd also say that it's a practice, right? It's something that it's not about doing perfectly, but it's about doing consistently and showing up for yourself, because we get to learn about ourselves when we just pay a little bit more attention. So I think it really starts with that. I also know that her campus is a community of maybe a lot of people who like to write. And, it doesn't have to always be diving into a deep journal entry in the middle of your day, but maybe it's just carrying a notepad around with you and taking note of when you don't feel your best or when you feel overwhelmed, and keeping a little log of the things that you notice that you want to pay more attention to, so that when those feelings come up, they're familiar and you have a plan in place to take care of them.
I really want to challenge myself to reframe my approach to mental health as a mental health practice, because I think for myself and for so many of my friends, for so many readers, I have adopted this mindset that I am going to meditate every single day, or every day at 2 p.m. I'm going to have a cup of green tea and I'm going to sit on my patio and readjust my mind frame for the day. And then if I skip a day or I skip 2 days, I am completely thrown off. Versus if I view mental health moments of peace, moments of slowing down as a practice, if I skip a day, it's okay. I go back tomorrow. I don't have to throw the entire process away. It's still valid.
Yeah, that's so important. And I love the idea of modeling that also for the people in your circle and the people that you come across as well. We were just talking about physical activity and physical health, and it's really not that different from going to the gym, right? There are going to be days that you have the energy to push through a really hard workout or challenge yourself to lift that weight that's a little bit heavier. And there are going to be other days where just getting there and getting your sneakers on and going where you need to go is a huge accomplishment. And recognizing it as just that, I think it does really remove, again, some of that judgment that we tend to put on ourselves and that pressure that we tend to put on ourselves around doing something perfectly. And this is kind of your place and your practice to discover as it works for you.
I want to talk a little bit about your journey from her campus to working in the mental health space. Can you tell us a little bit about your career trajectory and how you got involved with Headspace and working in this area?
Yeah. So, I have a background in communications, media relations, community engagement, but I had always really had a passion for storytelling and also mental and emotional well-being, and the importance of caring for our minds and the impact of that on how we show up. So, after a couple of years post grad, I decided to pursue my master's in social work. And I made this decision because when it came to telling stories about causes and communities that I cared about, I really wanted to understand people and systems and the whys of that work on a deeper level, so that the impact I was making could feel more tangible. So I went back to school, and my studies in social work centered on social impact, corporate social responsibility, communications for nonprofits, and really how to develop programs that truly move the needle forward. But yeah, I've always been focused on supporting young people in particular, because I think there's an inherent responsibility to equip the next generation with the tools that they need to thrive. And so when I saw that Headspace was prioritizing not only youth mental health, but providing resources to a young person's entire community of care, which also includes educators, caregivers, et cetera, I knew that was something I wanted to be part of.
And before you got to Headspace, you worked in the office of the First Lady, Michelle Obama. What can you tell us about working in politics and media?
Yeah, I mean, it was such an incredible early career experience to work in public service for a lot of reasons, but you're really just surrounded by some of the brightest minds in the nation and by folks who are incredibly dedicated to solving complex problems with the goal of making life better for communities everywhere. So, it's very fast paced working in media in general, but especially in politics, there's a speed to the work that's very energizing because of how rapidly things are changing and how immediately we can access information now. So the stakes are high, of course, because there are real lives being impacted on a massive scale when you're talking about politics and public service. And every day, you really have to stay laser focused on all of that when it comes to research and how we're telling stories and communicating with the public and decision making. But overall, it is very much a mission oriented space that's really just filled with people who are ready to show up for their communities.
One of the common themes we've heard through recording this podcast is community and having a North Star of almost either giving back or building a community that is reflective of who you want to challenge and who will challenge you. Mm-hmm. And I'm curious, especially moving from a extreme high speed work environment into something like mental health, where one of the key elements of it is slowing down. What was that like for you to kind of move from one space to the other?
Oh, it's such a good question. And, it's true that working in mental health and working with different communities and individuals really does require a bit of a shift in pace because active listening is so key to informing the way that you design programs, the way you design initiatives and communications and PR strategies and all of that. So if you're not doing that active listening in a very intentional way from the get-go, it does affect the end product and you risk not necessarily having the impact that is really going to center the community in the way that they're expressing that they need. So yeah, I would say it was a bit of a challenge, but in such an eye-opening and really rewarding way, because I think it also feeds into the way that we can do that really fast-paced work more intentionally as well, is when we're listening to people, when we're listening to each other, when we're really meticulous in our research and where we're getting our information from before we put together a story, I think the impact is just so much greater. So like we were saying before, it's really a practice. And, sometimes you have to go back and forth between those two things because you're still working for a large organization whose priorities are moving quickly, but it's a muscle that you gain by going back and forth, really recognizing when I need to slow down, when I really need to listen to what this person's saying, and then when I need to speed up because I need to take that information and really make something impactful with it.
I am curious because on my end and in my day-to-day, the needs of an influencer who is extremely established and post-grad and has, close to maybe 100K, 200K followers, their needs are so different than a student journalist who is figuring out how to translate their voice into an article that is so personal to them. And their needs are different. And so how I listen and interact is different. Do you feel like that is similar in your role where you have to listen to different communities and understand what it is that they need? But do you feel like the way that you listen changes based off of community to community as well, especially as we're talking about active listening?
Yeah, I think it's such a good question. I would say that really, one thing we talk a lot about in this space, specifically in social impact and mental health, is that we really are our own tool. And so the clearer that we are in ourselves, in how we show up and how we're perceived, in our self-awareness, all of those things really create the ultimate tool, which is yourself as a helper, as an active listener. And so I think if you're solid in that and you continue to practice that and make changes as you need to, then no, I think you continue to show up authentically as yourself, and the information that comes in is maybe filtered a little bit differently. But as long as you're fully present and really hearing what people are saying, what you do with that information and the program or the campaign that you design after that might be different. The output might be different, but I think the process of collecting that information only gets stronger with time and with practice.
It is a muscle. It is a practice. I think the theme of this podcast episode in particular is, to quote Hannah Montana, no one is perfect. Nobody's perfect.
Yes.
And things are going to adjust. And it also is so powerful to give yourself that grace, because when you can give yourself that grace, you're giving everybody else grace. And I just think it echoes in your community as well.
Absolutely. And I know that this is a community of really talented and ambitious people. And I want to say it doesn't make you any less of those things to take those moments of pause or to get new information and change your mind, or, to grow and change. That none of that changes, the resilient and dedicated person that you are. You just want to give yourself the space to grow. And if you are too hard on yourself all the way through, then that can actually limit the way that you're growing and learning too.
To that point, I was recently at a seminar, and the professional who was giving it was mentioning how every day they take a walk because they work in a creative space. And I work in a creative space, and I have started incorporating just a 20-minute brief time away from my desk. And when I come back, the work I'm putting out is so much stronger because I've given myself time to actually think about what I'm doing, as opposed to jumping from email to task to Slack message to responding to a direct report to trying to come up with something extremely creative. When your brain is functioning at its best, when you get a little bit of oxygen and a little bit of movement. Yeah. So I think we have decided that to slow down is against hustle culture and is against moving forward. But it could be one of your biggest assets in a career space as well, to give your brain what it needs to function and allow you to do what you actually love to do.
100%. I'm so glad you said that, because really, I think what you're getting at is this idea of space. And sometimes we might need some physical space, we might want to be alone for a couple of minutes. We also need that space mentally, right? So that we can let those creative thoughts come to us, so that we can do our best work, so that we can come up with the answers that maybe, our brain has been gnawing at, but we just haven't gotten there yet. Sometimes we just need to kind of step aside and get out of our own way. And you're actually supporting yourself in that process. And ultimately, I think becoming a stronger person and professional when you give yourself a little bit of space.
You have a rich history of mission-driven work and of community-based work. I am curious, especially because this is the Her Campus Media Celebrating 15 Years podcast. How did your time with Her Campus lay the groundwork for your career?
Yeah, what I loved from the jump about Her Campus was how intentional the organization has always been to not just provide technical experiences to those who are looking to, get their hands-on experience in media, writing, whatever it might be, but also its commitment to bringing students together around the issues that are important to them. And so my first assignment with Her Campus was to cover First Lady Michelle Obama's Let Girls Learn initiative, which was just kicking off at the time, and to help engage my campus community to support the work around breaking down barriers and advancing access to education for girls across the globe. And so working on this initiative first at the campus level, and seeing the impact of what can happen when we tell stories that matter to us was really my first experience of mission-driven work and media intersecting. And I mean, truly, it's the reason I pursued a career in social impact.
Wow. That's amazing to hear. And I love that you phrased it as intentional. And I really do think that one of my biggest moments as well with her campus was getting to see how a local story is so much larger than just a local story. For your example, with Michelle
Yes.
Obama, Let Girls Learn, what an amazing opportunity to see it as a individual on a college campus and how it's impacting colleges across the world, students across the world, young women across the world. And I really do think that the intentionality is so key there.
Yeah.
Anna, as we come to the end of our time and we're discussing intentionality, what advice do you have for other alumni, soon to be college grads, on balancing that mental health and a thriving career that forces them to be online potentially with Headspace or any other resources that you have?
Yeah, I mean, I would say remember to pace yourself, take those screen breaks when you need to so that you can create a little bit extra space in your brain to do the work that really matters to you, and be a mindful consumer of content as much as possible. Curate feeds that keep you informed about the things that you know you need and want to learn about, but also a feed that empowers you and helps you strengthen your community. So I would say all of that, and then learn what works for you when it comes to refilling your cup. Again, it's a practice, it takes time, but taking the time to learn that about yourself doesn't make you any less talented, any less ambitious, and can ultimately really have a positive impact in how you move through your career.
Before we wrap up this episode, we are doing rapid fire questions with all of our guests. And
Fun.
my first question for you is, what would you tell 21-year-old Anna?
Oh, so much, but if I had to narrow it down, I would say there are so many opportunities to do meaningful work and just get closer to ourselves. I think the more we approach life and career from a place of curiosity versus non judgment, the more we learn about who we are and how we can thrive and what we can contribute in the best way possible. And also keep doing the things that matter to you outside of your job, whether that's art or advocacy or sports or whatever it is. All of those things ultimately contribute to our wholeness and make us better at what we do.
I have loved the re-emphasis on hobbies, especially in a COVID impacted world, of whether it's taking up a brand new skill that has always been interesting to you, but you've never had a chance to really zero in on that, or going back to a hobby that you potentially had when you were a kid that you almost abandoned. For me, that had been tennis, and it has been so fun to re-emphasize hobbies. And I think it does, to your point, totally impact the experience of getting to know yourself and also who you are. My next rapid fire question for you is, what is something you are looking forward to?
I am looking forward to autumn in New York City. There is an inherent calling for me to kind of hit the reset button around this time of year, set new goals, explore new things in my community, travel, think about my work in a different way, and also just try new creative things in my spare time, like recipes and I don't know, new movies, things like that. So I'm excited about fall.
I am too. I think it is almost a universal experience at this point where everyone is sort of like, okay, it's time. It's
It's
time.
time.
It's time. My last question is, where can we keep up with you and your journey?
Oh, definitely connect with me on LinkedIn and send me a note. I love being able to connect with others coming up in this space, especially within the Her Campus community. So please reach out there. And in terms of mental health and wellness, I definitely encourage you also to download the Headspace app and explore the many different resources that can be found there. There's really something for anything that you might be navigating, whether it's stress through school, graduation, or just navigating things like election related anxiety. There's really something for everyone in every moment that you're in. So definitely don't be afraid to take advantage of those resources.
Anna, thank you so much for joining us on Beyond Her Campus, celebrating 15 years.
Thank you so much, Julianne. This was so much fun.
So fun. And everyone, remember to slow down today a little bit. That wraps up another episode of Beyond Her Campus, celebrating 15 years. We hope you enjoyed today's conversation. If you loved this episode, be sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. And don't forget to leave a review. We'll be back in 2 weeks with more incredible stories from our amazing alums. Until then, HCXO.